A perfect marriage can sometimes be the most convincing lie ever lived.
Yeah,
Emily
I'll see you
Carter
tonight.
lived in a world that looked stable from the outside. A quiet suburban neighborhood in Austin, Texas. A well-kept home with white curtains, a neatly trimmed lawn, and a husband who everyone respected. Daniel Carter was a successful financial consultant, known for his discipline, intelligence, and calm professionalism. To neighbors, friends, and co-workers, they were the ideal couple. No arguments in public. No visible cracks. No signs of instability. Their life appeared structured, predictable, and secure, like something carefully designed rather than naturally lived. But perfection is often not peace. It is maintenance. Behind closed doors, Daniel's presence began to feel increasingly distant. His phone was always placed face down, as if even notifications were something to be hidden from sight. His explanations for late nights followed the same pattern: short, rehearsed, and emotionally empty. Business meetings, unexpected deadlines, client emergencies, always something that demanded his absence. Emily never questioned deeply. Trust had been the foundation of their marriage, or at least what she believed trust looked like. She interpreted distance as stress, not deception. Silence as focus, not secrecy. But over time, small details began to shift. The house no longer felt fully alive. Conversations lost their natural rhythm. Eye contact became brief, almost accidental. Even shared meals turned into quiet routines rather than moments of connection. Nothing was openly wrong, yet everything felt slightly misaligned, like a picture hanging just a few degrees off center. Emily did not realize it yet, but she was living inside a structure that had already begun to split into two parallel realities. One that belonged to her, and one that no longer did. Daniel still performed normalcy with precision. He smiled when expected, responded when necessary, and played the role of a stable husband without deviation. But emotional presence was no longer part of him in the way it used to be. It was absence disguised as routine. And Emily, without knowing it, had started adapting to that absence as if it were normal. The change did not announce itself. It accumulated quietly, like pressure building behind glass that still looks intact. Then came the moment that did not feel important at first. A single evening like any other. The house quiet. The lighting warm. The familiar silence between them stretching across rooms. Daniel left his phone on the kitchen counter while stepping outside briefly. The screen lit up. Emily was not looking for anything. She was not searching. But her attention caught the notification automatically. The way the mind reacts to movement in stillness. One message. A name she had never heard before. And beneath it, a short line that did not belong to anything she understood about her husband. Emily stared at it without moving. The house around her remained unchanged, but something in her perception had already shifted. The silence no longer felt neutral, felt staged. She reached for the phone slowly. And as her fingers touched the screen, the notification updated again, confirming that the name was not accidental. It was connected to Daniel. And it had been waiting for her longer than she knew. One message is enough to destroy the illusion of trust. It happened on an ordinary evening in the same quiet Austin home that still looked unchanged from the outside. Daniel Carter had left his phone on the kitchen counter while stepping into the shower. The house was calm, filled with the soft hum of routine appliances and the distant sound of water running behind a closed bathroom door. Emily Carter was not searching for anything. She was not suspicious by nature, not the kind of wife who checked screens or questioned silence. She was simply moving through the kitchen when the phone screen lit up. A notification appeared. Message preview. A name she did not recognize. And a sentence fragment that felt out of place in the life she believed she was living. Emily froze. Her eyes stayed locked on the screen longer than necessary, as if staring hard enough could correct what she was seeing. Her mind immediately tried to protect her from interpretation. Wrong contact. Work conversation. Accidental message. Something harmless that did not belong to suspicion. But the feeling it created was not logical. It was emotional weight without explanation. That was what made it dangerous. That night, something subtle shifted in how Emily experienced her husband. Daniel did not change suddenly. He still moved through the house with the same calm discipline. He still asked polite questions and maintained routine presence. But to Emily, he became harder to read, as if something had moved behind his eyes that she could no longer fully access. He began keeping his phone closer. When notifications appeared, they disappeared faster. When it was left unattended, it was always face down in a way that felt intentional rather than casual. His expressions remained controlled, but now they felt managed, as if he was balancing two versions of himself in the same space. Emily started noticing repetition where she had once seen normal conversation. Late meetings that sounded identical each time. Work obligations that carried no detail. And one name that slowly began surfacing through fragments of explanation. Sophie. The name had first appeared casually, described as just a coworker. Nothing significant. Nothing worth attention. But now it was no longer just a name. It felt like a thread that kept reappearing in different places, always just out of reach of clarity. Emily did not confront him. She did not accuse. She did not even fully define what she was feeling. She simply began observing, listening more carefully, watching more closely, noticing timing instead of words. And in that shift from trust to attention, something irreversible began forming. Because suspicion does not need proof to grow. It only needs repetition. Still, Emily told herself she had nothing concrete. Only discomfort. Only patterns that might mean nothing. But discomfort, once it settles, does not stay quiet. Starts reshaping everything around it. Especially the person you thought you knew. That night, after Daniel fell asleep, Emily waited until the house was silent. Then she opened his phone backup from a synced device he had forgotten existed. First, everything looked normal. Photos, files, routine data. Nothing alarming. Nothing out of place. Until she found a folder Daniel believed had been deleted months ago. And inside it, a conversation thread that had never been meant to be recovered. The first message loaded on the screen. And Emily's certainty about her marriage finally began to break. The man she trusted is living a second life she was never part of. Emily Carter did not wake up the next morning with a plan to investigate her husband. There was no dramatic decision, no moment of clarity that pushed her forward. Instead, there was something far more unstable. Curiosity that refused to settle back into silence. She told herself she was only confirming what she already half understood. That was the lie she used to justify what came next. Using the same synced access point from the night before, Emily began moving through Daniel's digital footprint with quiet precision. She checked archived emails first, the ones automatically filtered out of his main inbox. Then calendar entries, hidden by private settings. Then travel confirmations linked to corporate accounts that should have been routine. But nothing about it was routine. What appeared was structure. Hotel bookings that did not align with declared business trips. Reservations made in cities Daniel had never mentioned. Time blocks marked as client engagement that overlapped with weekends and holidays. Every detail carried the same pattern of repetition, as if his life outside the home followed a second schedule entirely. And within that structure, the same name kept appearing indirectly. Sophie. Not always written clearly. Sometimes abbreviated, sometimes attached to locations, sometimes embedded in group entries that still pointed to a consistent presence. Emily did not need it explained anymore. Sophie was not incidental. She was embedded. That realization did not break Emily all at once. It arrived slowly, like pressure building in a sealed room. First came confusion, as she tried to reconcile data with memory. Then denial, as she attempted to find alternative explanations that did not involve betrayal. Then something heavier, acceptance without comfort. Daniel Carter was not simply hiding messages. He was maintaining continuity. A parallel life that had been running long enough to become stable. Emily began revisiting her memories, not because she wanted to, but because she could not stop herself. Nights he claimed to be working late now reassembled differently. Phone calls taken outside the room now felt deliberate. Weekend absences she once accepted as professional necessity now aligned too cleanly with the patterns she was uncovering. The past had not changed, but her interpretation of it had. And that shift made everything feel unstable. Emily understood, in a way she could not undo, that she was not discovering a single mistake. She was uncovering an ongoing structure. A relationship that had moved forward in parallel with her marriage, existing consistently outside the version of life she was allowed to see. That realization did not arrive loudly. It settled, and stayed. By late night, Emily stopped searching for emotional meaning and focused only on records. She reopened transaction logs, scanning line after line with growing detachment, until something stopped her movement completely. Receipts. Multiple entries. All tied to the same hotel chain. All repeating the same pattern of dates, intervals, and returns. 8 months of consistency. No gaps that suggested accident. No variation that suggested coincidence. Just repetition that confirmed intention. Emily stared at the screen longer than she intended, her breath slowing without her permission. The data did not accuse. Simply existed. An existence in that form was enough. Because now she was no longer guessing what Daniel might be hiding. She was looking at how long he had been hiding it. And then she noticed something else at the bottom of the records. A booking that was not listed under his name at all. The other woman is closer to her life than she ever imagined. Emily Carter expected distance. That was the only way her mind could still protect her from collapse. In her imagination, Sophie was supposed to be a stranger in a distant city, a name attached to mistakes made far away from home, far away from consequence. But reality refused that version. When Emily searched for Sophie, she did not find obscurity. She found presence. Social profiles appeared first, ordinary at a glance but unsettling in accumulation. Professional accounts connected to Daniel's workplace. Mutual industry groups. Shared event listings that overlapped in time frames Emily herself had indirectly been part of. Not as a participant in Sophie's life, but as a silent witness existing in the same ecosystem. Sophie was not outside Emily's world. She was embedded inside it. The realization created a mental distortion Emily could not immediately stabilize. This was not an affair stretching across cities and anonymous hotel rooms. This was something structurally closer. A parallel relationship functioning within the same environment, moving through the same professional and social spaces without ever fully revealing itself. Emily scrolled further, each detail tightening the knot in her chest. Photographs confirmed what data could not soften. Sophie appeared in images with Daniel in ways that felt disturbingly familiar. Not staged, not forced, natural comfort. Subtle proximity. The kind of emotional ease that does not develop quickly and cannot be entirely faked for appearances. Their expressions carried familiarity that suggested repetition, shared history, and private understanding. Emily began reinterpreting her entire marriage through this new lens. Every evening Daniel came home late without explanation now carried a second meaning. Every phone call he stepped away to answer now felt like separation with intention. Every moment he seemed emotionally absent while sitting right beside her now became evidence instead of coincidence. The more she reviewed, the more the past began to restructure itself around Sophie's invisible presence. A new fear started forming, quieter than anger but heavier. Had Sophie ever been inside their home? The question did not feel theoretical, felt physical, like something already present in the walls, waiting to be confirmed. Emily's gaze drifted automatically across her living room, the sofa Daniel sat on every night, the kitchen where they ate together, the hallway that held their shared routine. If Sophie existed this close to Daniel's life, proximity was no longer abstract. It was architectural. Trust collapsed into observation. Observation collapsed into suspicion. and suspicion turned into a compulsive replay of every shared moment Emily had ever experienced with her husband, searching for signs she had missed while believing she was safe. But memory did not offer comfort anymore. It offered reinterpretation. And that was worse. Because betrayal no longer felt like something happening elsewhere. It felt like something that had been living in the same spaces, passing through the same doors, existing just outside recognition. Emily leaned forward, scanning Sophie's profile again. This time slower, more focused. And that was when she noticed something she had ignored before. A faint background detail in one of the older images. A reflection, not of a public place, not of a workplace, but of a familiar interior space she knew too well. Her own home. And then she saw it. He comes home to her after loving someone else. That was the part Emily Carter could not reconcile with anything she had believed about marriage. Daniel Carter never disappeared from her life. He did not leave. He did not act distant in obvious ways that could be confronted or named. Instead, he remained fully present in the most unsettling way possible. He came home every night. He sat at the dinner table as if the house still meant the same thing to him. He asked small, ordinary questions about her day. He commented on trivial details. He watched television beside her in shared silence. And later, he slept in the same bed, his breathing steady, as though nothing inside him had changed. But Emily had changed. Now she saw him through layers of awareness that could not be undone. Every gesture felt divided, as if it belonged to more than one version of him. Every smile appeared managed, arriving on schedule rather than from emotion. Every silence carried intention, like space being preserved rather than naturally existing. The home did not feel broken, felt divided. Emily shifted into observation without meaning to. It became her default state. She watched how Daniel held his phone, always angled slightly away from her line of sight. She noticed how quickly he locked the screen when she entered a room. She tracked the subtle timing of his responses, how questions about his day were met with pauses just long enough to feel calculated. Even affection began to feel procedural. Kiss on the forehead before leaving for work. A hand briefly resting on her shoulder in passing. A smile offered at the right emotional moment. Nothing overtly wrong. Nothing that could be accused. But nothing that felt fully alive either. Emily started noticing microfractures in behavior that she had once ignored. A delay before answering simple questions. Faint hesitation before mentioning work. A slight adjustment in tone whenever conversations moved too close to topics she now associated with Sophie. It was not fear that hurt the most. It was recognition. The realization that Daniel had learned how to exist in two emotional realities without letting either collapse. One version of him belonged to their home. The other existed somewhere else entirely. And both operated without visible conflict. That was what made it unbearable. Because it meant nothing in her marriage had been accidental. It had been managed. And in that structure, Emily began to feel something unfamiliar growing inside her daily life. Not absence, not rejection, replacement. She was no longer someone he struggled to love. She was someone he had learned to live beside while loving elsewhere. And that distinction changed everything. The house remained quiet, predictable, almost peaceful in appearance. But Emily no longer experienced it that way. She experienced it as a stage where two separate lives overlapped without ever fully touching. Then, late one night, after Daniel had already fallen asleep, Emily stayed awake longer than usual. The room was dark, the silence steady. She stood up without making a sound and moved toward the part of the house Daniel never questioned her presence in. The garage storage cabinet, where he kept old tools, unused boxes, and things he considered irrelevant. Her hand reached behind a stack of forgotten documents. And there, hidden inside a sealed compartment she had never seen open, was a second phone. Truth stops being suspicion when it becomes undeniable. Emily Carter did not find the second phone through careful investigation or deliberate planning. It revealed itself through something far more dangerous than intent: routine absence. Daniel had left the house briefly that morning, forgetting the device in the place he believed no one would ever think to search. It was hidden with confidence, not fear. Tucked deep inside a storage compartment behind outdated documents, as if it belonged to a version of his life that operated outside accountability. Emily held it without immediate emotion. No shock, no panic, only stillness. The phone required a passcode, but it did not resist her for long. Whether through pattern, habit, or coincidence, access opened. And once it did, the last remaining structure of denial inside her began to collapse. Messages loaded first, then images, then entire threads of continuity that did not belong to a temporary mistake or isolated moment. This was not a single affair. It was a maintained reality. Conversations stretched across months with emotional depth that could not be mistaken for casual interaction. Plans that were repeated and refined over time. References to shared experiences that implied repetition, not spontaneity. Even small expressions of care carried consistency, as if they were part of an ongoing life carefully preserved between two people. Sophie was not an interruption in Daniel's marriage. She was an active system inside it. Emily read without interruption, her expression unchanged, but something inside her was shifting in ways that had no external sound. There was no breakdown, no visible reaction that matched what she was seeing. Instead, there was internal silence so complete it felt like pressure. Every belief she had held about her marriage reorganized itself in real time. Love, once understood as shared permanence, now redefined itself as selective attention. Trust, once automatic, restructured itself as incomplete perception. And her present life, the dinners, the conversations, the shared bed, no longer felt like reality. Felt like overlap. Two parallel existences occupying the same space without acknowledgement. Emily closed the phone slowly and placed it back exactly where she found it. Her hands were steady, but her awareness was not. She sat down in the dim light of the kitchen, staring at nothing in particular, realizing something that felt heavier than anger. She was no longer trying to discover the truth. She already had it. Now she was deciding what it meant to live with it. Minutes passed without movement. The house remained quiet. Daniel remained upstairs, unaware that something irreversible had already changed downstairs. Then Emily heard footsteps. Not hers. Not his. The laptop on the counter lit up briefly as Daniel's forgotten session remained active. An email window was open, unattended, glowing softly in the dark kitchen. And Emily saw the subject line before she even meant to look closer. Because what was written there was not part of memory. It was part of what was still about to happen. Sometimes silence is louder than confession. Emily Carter did not rush after what she had discovered. She did not confront Daniel immediately, nor did she allow emotion to dictate timing. Instead, she waited. Not out of fear, but out of something far more dangerous: clarity. For the first time in days, she was not searching for truth. She was waiting for it to face her directly. That evening, Daniel returned home later than usual. Nothing about his entrance was visibly different, but Emily noticed what she had never noticed before. The subtle shift in atmosphere when a person enters a space carrying unspoken knowledge. His eyes moved slightly slower. His attention scanned the room differently. He knew something was not aligned. He just did not know how much she knew. Emily did not speak at first. She simply placed everything on the kitchen table. The second phone. Printed message threads. Screenshots. Email excerpts. Each piece arranged with precision, not emotional chaos. There was no shaking in her hands, no visible collapse. Only structure. The same kind of structure she had once believed defined her marriage. Daniel looked at the table. And then he looked at her. No immediate reaction followed. No denial. No confusion. No defensive anger. Only silence. That silence stretched longer than Emily expected. It was not empty. It was heavy, as if the truth had already settled between them before either of them spoke. Finally, Daniel sat down slowly. Not like a man preparing to argue. like a man accepting that argument was no longer possible. When he spoke, his voice was not sharp. It was tired, controlled in a different way than before. Not management of emotion but surrender of it. "I didn't think it would become this." The sentence was simple, but it changed everything. Because it confirmed something Emily had not allowed herself to fully accept until that moment. Awareness. He had known what was happening. He had understood the structure of what he was building while he was building it. This was not an accident formed through weakness or impulse. It was continuity maintained through choice, even as consequences grew around it. Emily felt something inside her shift, not explosively, but permanently. The marriage did not collapse through shouting, collapsed through recognition, because there was nothing left to misunderstand. No version of events left to reinterpret. No emotional space left for ambiguity. Only clarity. And clarity is often what destroys what denial was protecting. Daniel lowered his gaze briefly, as if searching for something in the surface of the table that could explain what words could not. Then he spoke again, quieter this time. And what he said next did not defend him. It defined everything that had come before. Because it was not an explanation. It was an admission of scale. And Emily realized the truth was still not finished unfolding. She realizes she was never the only wife in his emotional life. There was no dramatic collapse of walls or voices raised in anger. No final argument that shattered what remained. Instead, there was something far more unsettling. Quiet acceptance, unfolding in a space that had already been emptied long before either of them admitted it. Emily Carter moved through the house slowly, packing without urgency. Each item she placed into a bag carried fragments of a life that now felt observational rather than lived. A life she had once believed was shared, but now understood had always been divided. Clothes folded neatly. Essentials collected with care. Personal objects separated from emotional attachment. It was not escape. It was separation of identity. Daniel remained in the house, but he did not interfere. He did not try to stop her. He did not plead or argue. There was no performance of desperation, no final attempt to rewrite what had already been concluded. Instead, he moved through the same space with a quiet recognition that the ending had already taken place long before action made it visible. What remained now was only acknowledgement. Emily paused briefly near the kitchen counter. The wedding ring sat there. Heavy. Familiar. It no longer represented union. It no longer carried the meaning it once held. It had become an object disconnected from its own symbolism, stripped of emotional authority. She stared at it for a long moment, not with anger, not with grief, but with clarity, because what she understood now was not only that she had been betrayed. It was that she had been compartmentalized within a life that was never singular to begin with. Daniel had not been living one truth. He had been maintaining multiple emotional realities simultaneously, each one functional in its own context, none fully exclusive to the other. And she had been positioned inside only one of them, believing it was the whole. That realization did not destroy her, clarified her. Emily picked up her bag, taking nothing that belonged to memory alone, only what belonged to her present self. The version of her that had emerged through recognition rather than assumption. She walked to the door. The house did not resist her departure. It simply remained still, as if it understood that nothing new was ending. Only something that had already concluded internally was finally being expressed outwardly. Outside, the night air felt different. Not because the world had changed, but because her place within it had. For the first time in a long time, Emily was no longer living inside a version of her life constructed by someone else's divided attention. She was no longer a participant in an illusion maintained through silence. She was finally outside it. And as she stepped forward into the quiet street, she understood something that had been forming since the first message appeared. She was not the woman who stayed behind anymore. She was the woman who understood everything she had once been willing to ignore.